The second leg in the Europa League semifinals is officially here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my predictions. In the first leg, we saw some very interesting results. We saw Braga get that 2-1 win against Freiburg at the death, and we also saw Nottingham Forest get a 1-0 upset against Aston Villa. But in today's video, we are predicting the second leg games and which teams will be advancing to the Europa League final. Which Premier League team will make it to the final? Will Freiburg make it to their first European final in history, and will Braga get back to winning ways? That's what I'm going to be talking about in today's video. As always, if you've been enjoying all the Europa League content this year, remember to subscribe to the channel because we're almost at 8,000 subscribers and I can't do it without you guys. But without further ado, let's get right into these predictions. Starting off with the first match, we got Aston Villa against Nottingham Forest. I'm going to start off by talking about the first leg game because I predicted that game to end in a 1-0 win to Nottingham Forest, and it did end in a 1-0 win. And this game was very 50-50. Realistically, it could have gone either way. In my opinion, I was surprised that there wasn't more goals in this game. I feel like the referee João Pinheiro usually likes to give a lot of cards and a lot of penalties as well, and we did see a penalty, which is how Nottingham Forest got their one goal from Chris Wood. But again, I'm surprised that we didn't see more goals. In terms of this game, I thought it was very 50-50. I feel like both teams had many chances. I do feel like Aston Villa probably started off the game better than Nottingham Forest, but coming into this game after about 20 minutes, I do feel like Nottingham Forest did start to pick up form. They had a few really good shots. In the 30th minute, I remember Igor Jesus had a point blank shot against Emiliano Martinez, but he made an incredible save. I don't know how he pulled that off, but I really think Igor Jesus probably should have scored that. But then going into the second half, we saw a very similar situation with Aston Villa when the ball was moving around the box and it landed with Ollie Watkins right in front of the net, and Ortega made an incredible save. Now, to be fair, he did shoot it right at him, but once again, we see an amazing save by the keepers in this game. And with that being said, I actually think probably the two best players on the pitch were both keepers. Ortega made some very good saves, and same with Emiliano Martinez. Both keepers had great games. We saw some great saves by them, and that's why it was a low scoring game. But at the end of the day, the decisive goal came down to Chris Wood's penalty in the 71st minute. Now, this was a very strange situation as the ball was about to go out of play, but Omari Hutchinson kicks the ball in, he keeps it in, and Luca Digne, who was guarding him, puts his hands up like he's cheering or something. The ball hits his hands and goes out of play, and at first a lot of people didn't expect a penalty because most people thought that the ball was already out of bounds. But after a long VAR check, they realized that the ball was still in play, and Luca Digne had his hands flying in the air. And obviously Chris Wood was never going to miss that penalty. But with that being said, Nottingham Forest are going back to Villa Park with the 1-0 advantage. And I do feel like this is a really important advantage. And especially if you look at Aston Villa's recent form in recent games, they don't look so good. Aston Villa have lost all 3 of their last 3 matches. We saw them lose 1-0 against Fulham in the Premier League. Then obviously they lost that last game against Nottingham Forest. And in their recent Premier League fixture, they lost 2-1 against relegation Tottenham. Now, to be fair, I do think that Unai Emery has put most of his focus into the Europa League, so I don't think he's too stressed out about these Premier League fixtures. But at the same time, it does definitely lower the team morale. Obviously, they're not going to be playing as good as they would be playing if they were on incredible form like Nottingham Forest currently are, and for that reason I actually think Nottingham Forest have a decent chance to advance. If you look at Nottingham Forest, on the other hand, they've won their last 4 matches in a row, and I do feel like this is incredible form for a team who has been struggling with relegation this season. And under their manager Vitor Pereira, I think they've been incredible. They've scored 10 goals in their last 3 matches, including a 4-1 win against Burnley. Then they won 5-0 against Sunderland, and obviously in the last game against Aston Villa, they won 1-0. Now, Aston Villa will be the more rested club as their last Premier League fixture was taking place today as I'm recording this video on Sunday, whereas Nottingham Forest are playing tomorrow against Chelsea. So depending on that result, it could possibly change the mentality of these Nottingham Forest players coming into this match. But unless they get absolutely battered, I do still feel like they will have a good chance in this match. Now, Villa Park is definitely going to be a tough stadium, and we already saw Nottingham Forest against Aston Villa at Villa Park earlier on in the season, and Aston Villa won 3-1. It was a very impressive win by them. We saw those goals from John McGinn, and overall, they played very good in that game. But like I already mentioned, I just feel like Nottingham Forest are on the better form, and their mentality is much better than that of Aston Villa at the current moment. I know that Unai Emery is the Europa League specialist. In the Europa League, he's maybe one of the best in the world. There's not many managers that come close to the resume of Unai Emery's teams in the Europa League. But with that being said, for some reason, I have confidence in Nottingham Forest. I predicted the first leg right. I predicted them to get the win, and I feel like Nottingham Forest are going to go through. So with that being said, I'm going to predict a 2-2 draw in this game. I think it's going to be much more high scoring, but I think Nottingham Forest will advance on aggregate. And moving on to the second semi-final match, we have Freiburg against Braga. We're going to start off by looking at the first leg game because that game was fantastic. I predicted a 2-2 draw, and Braga did get that late winner to make it 2-1, and they are coming into this game with the advantage on aggregate. Now, if we look at that first leg game, obviously Braga did have the home advantage, and I feel like a lot of people would have favored Braga in that first leg game, mainly due to the fact that Freiburg defensively have been so poor this season. And I did say it in my first leg prediction video, where Freiburg have been one of the worst teams defensively in the Bundesliga. They have a minus goal difference, and currently sitting in the top half of the table, to have a minus goal difference is pretty poor. And if you look at Freiburg's recent form, they haven't won a single game in their last 4 matches, which is pretty poor for them, because if you look at some of their matches before their last 4 games, they were actually on good form. But recently we saw them lose against Stuttgart in the DFB Pokal, then they lost 4-0 against Borussia Dortmund. Obviously in the last game they lost 2-1 against Braga, and recently in the Bundesliga they drew 1-1 against Wolfsburg. And like I mentioned, I do think this comes down to how poor they've been defensively. Ginter, although yes, he's a decent defender, I don't think he's the best. In the first game against Braga, I wasn't a fan of their left back Makengo. I thought he was very poor. And Lionheart, I thought he was shocking in the first game. I thought he was very bad. Now, speaking a little bit more about that first leg game, it was a pretty 50-50 game, but I will say that I think Braga were the better team. This game had many different changes in spells of possession. We saw Braga dominate the start of the game, but then we saw Freiburg grow into it. Obviously, then they got that goal to equalize, and coming to the end of the first half, it looked like either team could go ahead and win this game. And in the second half, I will say for the first 20 or 25 minutes, I think Freiburg were the better team. They had a few really good chances and probably could have scored. But obviously at the end of the game, Braga started to grow back into it. They started playing much better. They started dominating more of the possession, and then they got that 92nd minute winner, which was an incredible goal. But with that being said, I think on both of Braga's goals, it was due to defensive mistakes by Freiburg. That first goal in the 8th minute was very poor defensively. The center backs were just totally sleeping. And then in that second goal for Braga, they had a shot. It went straight to the goalkeeper, but instead of catching it, he accidentally parried it out right in front of another Braga player. He ends up scoring the goal in the last minute of the game, and Braga win 2-1. One last thing I have to mention about that first leg game was the penalty save by Atubolu. That save was absolutely incredible, and Zalazar is a player who has scored so many penalties this season. He is very good at taking penalties, and that shot that he took was going right to the corner. The only way that Atubolu could have saved it is if he dived early. So I will say that's great work from the penalty coach and from him as the goalkeeper to make that save. That was an incredible save. But coming into the second leg game, I do think Freiburg may struggle once again defensively. I don't think they will be able to keep a clean sheet, and with that being said, they're going to have to score multiple goals if they want to advance over Braga. But I do feel like Freiburg will be able to get it done. And if you look at Freiburg, especially in recent matches, a lot of their poor performances have come when they're playing away. But when they're playing at home in Germany, they're a much better team. They're much more compact. Yes, they still have defensive problems, but they're much better, and the attack plays with so much more confidence. If you look at Freiburg and their recent home fixtures, they've scored a lot of goals in majority of the games they play. I actually think that Freiburg will be able to get this win. I think it's going to be 2-1 at the end of full time. It will go down to penalties, and in penalties, I do think Freiburg will be able to get the win, and that's mainly due to their goalkeeper Atubolu. He's incredible at penalties. I think he's saved 6 out of the last 7 penalties faced. He's one of the best goalkeepers in the world in terms of saving penalties. And with that being said, if this game does come down to penalties, I do think Freiburg will beat Braga to advance to the Europa League finals. And that's the end of this video. Those were my Europa League predictions for the second leg semi-final matches. As always, if you agree with my predictions, remember to leave a comment down below. But if you disagree with my predictions, remember to leave your predictions down below, and I'll be sure to reply to every single comment. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I'm almost at 8,000 subscribers. And if you're excited for all the World Cup content coming your way, don't forget to subscribe. And obviously, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.